që unë pas fjalës profesorit do t'ju njoftoj. Faleminderit.
I'm now going to finish my talk with some reflections on the situation in Kosovo and on where can be invested in Kosovo. And then we have it's your turn. You have to take over and ask questions and remarks. Okay? First, I want to finish this off what we discussed this morning, and it's about the whole school readiness discussion. In Europe, you have two completely different ways of looking to school readiness. You have on the top, you have the UK and France, who are having a very specific idea of preparing the children before they go to primary school. And that's, if you look at videos about schools in France and in the UK, you're seeing that they have all kind of books and that they use the books in the last years of the kindergarten. And they try to learn them to read the letter of their name, and so it's very. And then you have the Scandinavian approach, which is completely different, especially for instance Norway, where you see that it's until the end of kindergarten it's focused on playing. If you go to an early childhood center in Norway, you see very seldom you see teachers which are working with books and with around letters, around counting. It's really outdoor play. It's completely other vision on early childhood education. So if you look back at the discussions we had about smooth transition, so I would say if you start new centers here in Kosovo, try to make them very child centers, very play centers in the church for the children of 3 years or 4 years, and then in the last year try to introduce from time to time more aspects that prepare them on going to primary school, but not only on cognitive aspect but also on the emotional and social aspects. Here we have a list of competences that the young people who are 15, 16 years of age, who are leaving school and without a diploma, what they called in English the early school leavers. And on the other hand, you're seeing what young children are learning in early childhood education, and you see that it's very similar. So the competences that the early school leavers are lacking are just the competences that we need to focus on in early childhood education. For instance, you have the cognitive ones, poor reading, literature, poor verbal for early school leavers, and then you see what in early childhood education, what is the focus on. But maybe more interesting are the non-cognitive characteristics. If you look at the whole research on early school leavers, then we are seeing that most of the early school leavers, they are not really, it's not that they are not intelligent enough or so, but they lack self-regulation, motivation to study, and that are all important competences that we can focus on in the early years. So you see that the list is quite interesting, and you see all the time that there is a link between what you can learn in early childhood education and what the one who don't like to learn anymore, but the early school leavers are. they are representing the failure of the education system. In fact, it's not their individual problem, but it's the education system who failed at them. And I think if we invest a lot in those competences, especially the social and emotional competences in the early years, I think it's very important to prevent early school leaving. Okay, now I'm going to do something very dangerous. I'm going to the situation in Kosovo. Of course, I'm not a specialist in Kosovo, but yes, I was here, I think, for 10 days, and I talked to around more than 100 people when I was here in focus groups and in people from NGOs, students, teachers, people from the government, so very different persons. So I first will start with the opportunities of the system. I think the high level of initial training is really very important, and I think you must make use of that it's on a university level. I already told you that there were so many other countries, even in Western Europe, who had until recently a very low level of early childhood education, and especially for the 0 to 3. So it's very important that you make use of that initial training. What is also an asset of the system in Kosovo is that there are child-free hours for 3 meetings and for reflection on practice. I can tell you that there are not so many countries in Europe who have that. So make use of that. It's very important. If teachers have to be all the time that they are working, have to be all the time with children, then it's not possible to reflect on practice, to improve practice. I refer again to Italy, to the excellent system they put on place in northern Italy. It was mainly due to the pedagogistas, what they called in Italy, who were doing the coaching during 3 hours that the teachers had no children, that they could discuss among each others. And with such a system, you can you can improve really the quality of the early childhood system. Okay, then you have also pedagogical coaches specialized to support teachers to work with children with special needs and disadvantaged families. That's also not many countries have that in Europe, so it's really an asset for the system of Kosovo. You have also coherent systems of CPD organized by NGOs. You have a lot of good NGOs in Kosovo who are doing great work and who are organizing CPD. You have also visited then there is space in primary schools to organize pre-primary. So I think also that's quite interesting that you have the space to do that you don't have to build. Of course, some of my colleagues will say there is danger of schoolification, but it depends on how you organize it. So you must be very aware that if you organize it in a school, that you have to have a focus on play and on other aspects which are linked to early childhood education, and not making an extension of the primary school of that year. But the fact that you have the space is very important. Then the curriculum. I studied the curriculum and I found it a very good curriculum. It's important that you work in the future with the teachers how to implement that they can give their own values, that they can their own interpretation of that curriculum. That is very important. But the curriculum itself, I think, is quite good. And then monitoring, the tasks and the responsibilities of the inspection are clearly defined. There are in many countries here around in the Balkan, there are a lot of countries where the inspection system is very poor and is not very efficient. Then the challenges. Yeah, we talked about it. I think the low enrollment is a huge problem. So I think really, I hope that the government will invest in new places. It's the 5% is really very, very low. I think that's the main challenge. Then in a system where the enrollment is so low, and we see it also in the figures, so the number of disadvantaged children who are attending early childhood is it's much lower than the middle class children. That's always the case, so that's also important. So at the time I was here, I heard very good things about the community centers that I think Save the Children was working it. But at the time, I don't know how it is now, but there was a lack of funding. I think that's really a great opportunity in the rural areas to work with those community centers who only give 2 to 3 hours a day of early childhood education. I think it's very interesting because you need not so many buildings, you need not so much teachers, so, and the effect, like I told from the EPI study, the effect on the children is the same. Of course, it's possible that in the rural areas, the families need full-time daycare, and there must be also in some places also full-time daycare. But I think when the employment of the women is quite low, it's interesting to invest first in half daycare, and later on you can make full daycare of it. Then workforce. Yeah, my impression when I did analysis was when I talked to people is that the teachers were very motivated, but they were not very positive about the wages they got for that work. So, and that you find in many countries. So working with children is in say a very attractive profession. There are a lot of young people who want to do that. But of course, if you want to have an early childhood workforce which is sustainable, that in the long term you have to invest also in, let's say, normal wages. Then, of course, it's only an impression I had, but in the analysis I did at the time of the initial training, but I've heard that the universities have changed a lot. But at that time there was too much focus on theory in the initial training and not enough of the link between theory and practice. So I want to be clear, I don't mean that you do not have to have theory in the initial training. Theory is very important, but you have to, the universities have to make the link between the theory and the practice. And also a thing what found me at the time that struck me was the fact that there was so few internship in the first years of the initial training. For instance, in my country, half of the time in the first year is the students are standing before a class. And here, and it's not only here, but also in the surrounding countries, so it's sometimes only in the third year, in the first years it's only observation, and only in the third years they are working with children. So I think you have to change that, because if you start with such a theoretical vision on early childhood education, it's very difficult for the students afterwards to make that link with practice. Then also too much a teacher-centered approach. So I think I am very happy that the Italian colleague is here. I think the Italians are the champions in child-centered approach. So I think it can be very inspiring to look at what's happening in Italy. Everybody talks about Reggio Emilia, but that's only a small town. It's in the whole of Italy, of North Italy, that they work with it. And then, so more emphasis on reflecting on practice, that's very important, and on partnership with parents is needed. And then a need for new forms of pedagogical inspiration, but you are doing that by inviting it. But it's important that I think that you open yourself to new pedagogies that are everywhere in Europe, and I think it's important that not that you implement it in a way like, for instance, I'm a great supporter of the Reggio approach, of the Italian approach, but I think it's impossible to say now the whole of Kosovo is going to work with the Reggio Emilia approach, because it's a long history in Italy, it's a whole philosophy behind, and I think Kosovo has to make his own pedagogy, but inspired by the pedagogies that are for the moment that are very lively in some European countries. Okay, and then the curriculum. So the pre-primary program. So I think you have to invest in that, because it's so important that the children get some experiences before to go to primary school. So the pre-primary year is very good, but be careful that you don't fall in the trap of the schoolification, that you make it a kind of a primary school of it. And then, yeah, the childcare centers. So I had the feeling, I don't know if you must react if you do not agree, but I had the feeling that it's quite focused on a medical approach, and I think that the medical things are of course very important with young children, but you must more go to a care approach and to an integration of care and education also with younger children. And then maybe another thing, so it can be interesting in the whole early childhood system that you have a monitoring system for the individual child, so that you have a system where you can say, okay, that child, he could do that and that 3 months ago, and now he can already do that, and not comparing it to the other children, but reflecting it on the child, on his own progress that he is making. So, okay, that was my task is finished. Now it's time for questions and for remarks. If you do not agree with my analysis of the Kosovo situation, please tell it.
Falenderoj profesor për këto gjëra që i sjellni para neve. Jam e Vludë Aliu për Institutit Pedagogjik. Merrem me edukimin parashkollor që disa vite. Disa gjëra prej atyre çka i prezantoj profesori me aktualitetin ton, kisha dashur më nalen në 2-3 çështje. Pika e parë që ndoshta tek shtetet e tjera është e tejkalume, te na është problemi bazik përfshirja e fëmijëve. Do me thonë, derisa tek shtetet e tjera flitet për 95% fëmijëve prej 4 vjeç të përfshin në edukim parashkollor, te na 5% jo, s'janë përfshirë. Te na është e kundërt. Do me thonë, synimi, prioriteti do të jetë në spari me përfshirjen. Tjerat në shtetet të tjera nuk është më rëndësi tek cilësia sa është numri i fëmijëve ngrohtë në raport me edukatoren. Edhe kjo është problematike te na. Është problematike sepse ka deri 25 fëmijë te 2 edukatore, shpeshherë në një pjesë të kohës, me në ditës metet vetëm një edukatore. Do me thonë edhe kjo sigurisht që pak ndikon cilësi të pas parasysh edhe kushtet në cilat punojnë te na edukatorët. Prandaj ndoshta kishëm pas nevojë për një këshill prej njerëzve që kanë tejkalu këto gjëra. Qysh me arrit të përfshirja më e lehtë e fëmijëve në edukim, përfshirja më e madhe e fëmijëve në edukim parashkollor, në përqindje më të madhe, edhe qysh me mri me e rregullu këtë çështjen e raportit edukatore fëmijë. Të pas parasysh se gjeneratat plot po diplomojnë në edukim parashkollor, edhe nuk kanë hapësirë ku me punu. Unë kisha thonë që këto janë dy çështje shumë të rëndësishme që ndoshta na kishin shërbyer për na ide që mundet me na dhënë profesori.
Atëherë edhe unë kam një pyetje. Na u tha sot gjatë prezantimit tënd që është mirë që edukimi i hershëm të organizohet në një institucion përgjegjës. A mund na elaboroni këtë më shumë? Ja. Në prezantimin tënd si rekomandim na e dhatë që është mirë që të kemi një institucion përgjegjës për zhvillimin e edukimit të fëmijërinë e hershme. Kisha nevojë që të na elaboroni pak më gjerë këtë.
On the governmental level, you mean, or yeah? Okay, I just give a short answer to you, and then. So if you talk about one adult for 25 children, it's about the children from 3 to 6. It's the older children, you mean? Yeah. Yeah. So I must say that there are in Europe many countries where you have that adult-child ratio. It's a bit in my country like that. It's in France like that. So you have huge differences. And it's already what I said before, that it's important. I think 25 is really the maximum. That's for sure. But it depends upon the training of the teachers, and especially the training and practice of the teachers. If they are really able to divide the children into groups and in those 25, and that's really very important. And it's not impossible. I have seen a lot of high quality centers with 25 children for one teacher. That's not really impossible to do that, but it depends upon how they are trained, and if they are trained in practice. If you have your training on university and you have only theory and you come and you stand in front of 25 children, then it's terrible. It's not possible, but you have to get from the first year into practice and then train it. Because you must be realistic in a way. You cannot, if you have only 5% of enrollment, and you will increase the enrollment, and you have to make choices. And if you are saying now we are going to lower the adult-child ratio, then it will even be more impossible to have a serious enrollment. So that's that's my idea about it. Okay. For your question, so if you have, if you will start from the government on for a large project, very of enrollment, and saying, okay, we want to go from 5 to 25 or something like that. So that needs really, the first thing I say, that needs time. So you have to take time for that, and you have to have a group at the governmental level who is in charge of that, of monitoring that process of growth of the early childhood centers. And I think it's also important that you include the other stakeholders with us, so people from who represent the childcare institutions, but also from the universities, researchers, so that you have a group which is monitoring also NGOs like Save the Children, step by step, or others, so that you really have a group of people who are monitoring that process, because it's not it's not a simple process to go. And also I would advise you, be realistic. You cannot go in 5 years' time from 5% to what Europe is asking, 95%. That's impossible. So you have to be realistic. Each year you have to have an increase of the enrollment of so many percent, and then you have to look at the budget and so. But I think it's important. It's important that you can. It's not because the minister is writing a law about that it will happen. So there will be a lot of people involved, and I think it's important to have always those three partners: research, policy, and practice in it. Other questions there? There were.
Përfërdita kryesiu, Ministria e Arsimit. Unë vetëm dështa një informat shtesë lidhur me shkollën e përfshirjes së fëmijëve në edukimin parashkollor parafillor. Unë këtu I kam dhonat e fundit vitit 2018-19. Mosha 0-5 vjeç në vitin 2018-19 tani është në 6.2%, do me thonë kemi rritje të përfshirjes së fëmijëve në edukimin parashkollor, por duhet ta kemi parasysh se ky nivel I ulët I përfshirjes së fëmijëve në edukimin parashkollor zakonisht është në moshën 0-3 vjeç, sepse në fëmijët të moshës 3 deri 5 vjeç shkollën e përfshirjes e kemi trotë 7.5, ndërsa atyre parafillor, do me thonë para përgatitje për klasën e parë, e kemi shkollën e përfshirjes në të 2.5%. Do me thonë këto janë informata shtesën, informatat e vitit 2018-19. Sipas sistemit informata, sipas sistemit në menaxhim informata në arsim që e kemi aty. Do me thonë dhona zyrtare.
Okay, thank you.
Jam Mihane Rafuna, jam edukatore në institucionin parashkollor Buzëqeshja. Deshta me bë një pyetje ju si ndoshta me një përvojë më gjatë. Sa mendoni që një edukatore ka kapacitet për sa vite për me punu me fëmijë 3 deri në 6 vjet ose 0 deri në 6 vjet? A mendoni që me një përvojë 15 vjeçare mundet t'i gjendet një punë ma e qetë, sepse e dihet që fëmijët do të një përkushtim të madh tek fëmia. Çka mendoni ju? Kam dëshirë ta di. Faleminderit.
Can the translator say it again, because I didn't understand it very well. Yeah. That's another interesting question. I think it depends upon the working conditions, and especially we were involved with other partners also in a project with case studies in Europe on, it was called professional learning communities, and it means that that you are working together with colleagues, and that also you have time to do that. And you're seeing that the motivation of the people is much higher if they are not alone responsible for the children in their classroom. And at that moment you're seeing that they are much more creative, and they found new things, and even teachers because in Belgium teachers have to work until the age of 62, and even teachers of 60, they are still very motivated to do that, who work in such learning communities. Of course, if you if you have a low wage, if you have never time to discuss about your work, to reinvent your practice, then I can imagine that you are, after a couple of years, that you are not so motivated anymore. But I think it depends on the working conditions, on the way that the workforce is organized in the centers. And working with children is, in a way, I always like to do visits because I'm always seeing young children who are doing all kind of crazy things that I've never seen before. So children are, in a way, if you compare it to other jobs, it's a very stimulating job, because children are so unpredictable and they are doing all kind of things. But it's, of course, it depends upon under which circumstances you're doing. If your groups are too large, if you have problems in your because the wage is so low that you cannot live in a normal way and depend on others and all kind of things, then it's different. But I think it depends upon the working conditions, and that's the reason why we also have to, like in other jobs, invest also in good working conditions. You not agree, I see? Other questions?
Bleta Bolaj. Ma herët e përmendet që qendrat e edukimit në fëmijërinë e hershme të cilësisë së ulët japin rezultate më të ulta. Prandaj nëse do duhej të vendosej një prioritet në rritjen e përfshirjes ose në rritjen e cilësisë, cili do të ishte mendimi juaj. Edhe pyetja tjetër e përmendet që në Kosovë ekziston qasja me mësuese në qendër, për cilën pajtohem, dhe do të ishte njëra nga mënyrat për të filluar për ta ndryshuar këtë qasje me stafin aktual.
Can you repeat the translator, the last? Yeah. I think what is interesting. I was a couple of weeks ago. I was in South Africa and in Vietnam, and there the situation is even much more worse, and so it's very a very top-down approach, and there they invested a lot in new methods of thinking about what you are doing in your job, and I think that's very important that you introduce that reflection in everything, and that's a bit the key towards another approach, and toward also a child-centered approach. And another thing is instruments where you can, but simple instruments, not too complicated, because it's not the teachers don't have the time to fill in big forms, but simple forms of where you can have a look at the individual child and have an idea of what kind of child it is and why that child reacts in such or such a way. And I think that's very important, that you have a kind of instruments. There are a lot of interesting instruments that have been developed in early childhood education to do that. There is in my own country, we're using the Laver scales, which is a very good instrument, where a teacher can have in a couple of in 10 minutes she can design an image of the development of a child, and then some months later she goes back to that instrument, and she is saying what have been now the progress of the last years. So that's about the steps. And what was your first question again, Thomas?
if you have to choose between quality and access, increasing access?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, and it's in every country the same. That, for instance, the system of Belgium and France, where you have 99% of children going to early childhood education from the age of 2.5, 99, but you have 25 children in one group, or between 20 and 25. So the politicians have to make. You have to make a choice in it, between choosing, but there are some quality criteria, like some of them that I mentioned this morning, that have to be fulfilled. I think, for instance, about the interaction with the children, between the adult and the children, that's very crucial. You cannot, if that's not okay, then there will be, it's nearly certain that there will be a very low quality, and that's important to invest in, and that you can do through initial training, and that you can do through continuous professional training. But for the rest, yeah, you have to make a choice in that. I don't think Kosovo can make a system like in Scandinavian countries, where you have two adults for I think 16 children. If you maybe you can do it in 10 or 15 years, but you have to be realistic in a way that you have to make choices, and I think it's to the politicians to make choices in that, but also to groups of advisory groups that advise the politicians or the Department of Education to find a good balance between the two.
Faleminderit, po uroj për konferencën. Është me të vërtetë një konferencë që ka pas shumë nevojë për më organizu. Unë jam Blerta Meta, jam në cilësinë e pedagogës në organizatën për fëmijë pa kujdes prindëror në Kosovë. Po ndërlidhna me disa nga diskutimet që ju profesor I paraqitët. Përshkruat një situatë shumë emocionale në momentin kur prindi vendos për me integru fëmijën në institucion parashkollor, do të thotë inkuadrimin në fëmijëri të hershme. Dhe paraqitet një situatë emocionale edhe për fëmijën edhe për prindin, do të thotë për zgjedhjen sa më të mirë të mundshme të një institucioni. Pasi që vin nga organizata për fëmijët pa kujdes prindëror, do të thotë organizata jonë mirët me fëmijët, do të thotë që janë të baraktisur, të keqtrajtuar, të lënë pas dore, të neglizhuar e tutje, dhe këta fëmijë do të thotë shteti vendos përkohësisht t'i strehojnë në familje strehuese apo alternative. Vetë faktin që e thatë është situatë emocionale, do të thotë shumë emocionale është për këta fëmijë kur nuk I kanë prindrit e tyre biologjik. Përmendet do të thotë edhe kurrikulën e Kosovës dhe keni shqyrtu e cila e thatë që do të thotë është mjaft mirë e punuar në letër, mirë po e thatë edhe një element shumë të rëndësishëm që ajo don zbatueshmëri në kuptimin e cilësisë. Fëmijët në Kosovë, në fëmijërit hershme, inkuadrohen do të thotë në kuadër të dy institucioneve, institucionin publik dhe institucionin privat, do të thotë kopshte private dhe shtetërore. Dhe aktualisht, me sa do të thotë unë jam në dieni, shteti jonë bën monitorimin e vlerësimit të fëmijërisë së hershme, sa I përket do të thotë vetëm në institucionin publik, çka do të thotë kjo, do të thotë që monitoron institucionet qerdhët shtetërore, ndërsa kur flasimi për një numër shumë të madh, se Kosovën e kanë përfshi, e kanë kaplu, muj me thonë, kopshtët me numër të madh të kopshteve private, lirisht muj me thonë që këto kopshte monitorohen direkt
nga institucioni I lartë I arsimit, Ministria e Arsimit, po nuk ka ndonjë monitorim që bën drejtoratet komunale të arsimit. Tash po ndërlidhna me ata, do të thotë se përfshirja është e nevojshme, kurrikula don zbatim, po si kishe mujt me na dhon informacion si funksionon këto vendet ma të zhvilluara kjo çështje dhe a mundet do të thotë një monitorim muj me thonë I mirëfillt me na kthy neve në regres edhe nëse kemi fëmijë të cilët inkuadrohen mirë, po nuk e shohim se si po punohet kurrikula në këto institucione. Faleminderit.
You want to give me some examples of countries where they are doing it well? Is it that? Yeah, okay. What we saw is for the integration of children in the system when they are coming for the first time to kindergarten. We're seeing that it's very important that you have mixed groups. Mixed age groups. In a lot of countries they are working with age groups, and even for the small children sometimes they have a special group for all the young children who are coming for the first time, and it's terrible. We have made some videos in those classes, and children are crying all the time, and then they put the youngest teacher, because they put with the youngest children, and then when she has 1 or 2 years experience, then she asks for another job, and then comes again a young teacher, and it's a really a system that it's not good, and it's much better if you have in early childhood mixed age groups, so that you have only a couple of one or maximum 2 children who are new in the group, and that the older children can help. For instance, if you have a child who is speaking another language at home, you have a Roma of I think Egyptian, or you call it a child, that the older child who is speaking the language can take care of the child and can help the teacher. And it's very interesting because those children, they are very proud that they can help a younger child, so he's giving completely other relationships between the children, which are very rich. So, and of course, I don't know how it is because I haven't seen in the morning when the children were going to school, but in some countries or in some schools, the parents may not enter the classroom. And I think with such young children, it would be, I should saying it's forbidden not to let the parents enter the classroom, because it's really essential that the parents can go in the classroom with the child and talk to the teacher, and after a couple of minutes leave them, but not that they have to stop on the door of the school and give their children. So there are a lot of very practical things. We have made a video which is translated in English, so if you are interested I can give you the link, and you can have some examples of around 10 schools who are doing it very well with it. Okay. It's 3 o'clock, so yeah.
Faleminderit shumë profesor për ligjëratat që mbajtë me ne. Padosh një falëndëru të gjithë dhe këta që parashtrojnë pyetje shumë interesante, por vjen mirë që kemi pas një auditor të tillë që të kanë përcjellë me vëmendje. Unë po duhet të më shkoqit një diçka që kanë lexuar kohën e fundit se shumë vende të Bashkimit Evropian pragun e kanë caktuar një prag 20% që shumë simdhënës në edukimin ose edukatorë në fëmijërinë e hershme të jenë të gjenisë mashkullore. Domthonë ka paragjykime që mund të edukohen vetëm nga gjenia femërore, po du me ditë përvoja të shteteve të Bashkimit Evropian si kanë arritur, kanë pas në vendim politik apo kanë bërë në bazë të ulëmtimeve me anë të këshillime të ndryshme organeve politikë bërë, si kanë treguar që duhet patjetër të vinë deri te ky prag 20%. Faleminderit.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm involved in that European movement already in the 90s to try to reach that 20% of male that was set in 94 of 92 by the network for childcare of Europe. And I wrote last year an article to say why is there so little progress? So it's really not easy to change that. We did in Belgium campaigns, and before the campaign there was, but it's with the very young ones, 0 to 3, they were only 0.9, and after the campaign they were 3.2. So it's not bad, but it's only 3.2. And then, of course, the government say, okay, you have got your campaign now, and then when we ask again to do some steps, then they say, yeah, but we've done already a campaign. And then you see, if you don't all the time invest in it, it always stops. It's very complicated. The cities that there are especially cities that are doing it very well. For instance, Hamburg has 30% of male teachers. And the reason why is because I already told that Germany had very few early childhood education, and then Angela Merkel, she came from the DDR, and she had an all other vision on it, and she invested a lot, also because Germany has a lot of money, and invested a lot in early childhood education, and at a certain point they couldn't find women anymore. And so they did a lot of projects for men working in early childhood education, and also for young boys. So they are, for instance, you know, there are some girls' days for pupils in secondary education to bring them to technical professions, and they did the same for boys to bring them to early childhood education. Of course, it's too early to see if it will have an effect, but in some cities it's really very interesting to see that the Germans realized very high numbers. The country which is doing generally very well in all over, if you go, is Norway. If you go to Norway, there you have 10-12% of the, and that's the highest number for a country. It's 10-12% of Norway. So the reason, one of the reasons why it's going so slowly is because there is, and I don't want to offend all the women educators in the room, but there is in early childhood education a more female approach of looking to children. And in Scandinavian countries, even if you have only women, you have another mentality, another culture. For instance, in Norway and Denmark and Sweden and Finland, I give you an example. I had 2 students, and they were going to Norway on an apprenticeship, and they came back and they said to me, Jan, we've seen something unbelievable. In Belgium they would put you in jail for that. And I said, yeah, what? Yeah, we were walking with the children along a lake from a fjord. You know, it's very deep water in the fjord, very cold. And there were 2 children, a boy and a girl, from 5 years old, and they were walking all alone 300 meters from the educator. But they had a swimming, how you call it in English, and so that's what the Scandinavian countries have. They put a lot more focus on outdoor play, on challenging the children, seeing, looking at the borders they have and going around the borders, and that's attracting more men. While in some countries, like for instance Portugal, the most emotional early childhood is in Portugal. They all the time they taking the children they're hugging them, and then so it's very, in a way, feminine. You understand? So you have different approaches in early childhood education, and if you want more male, you also have to change that a little bit. And it's you also can do it without men, like they do it in the Scandinavian countries. But it's important to have to enlarge the visions on early childhood education. So that's the only way you can change it. That's my opinion. But it's going very slowly.
Përshëndetje, unë jam Marieta Cilimi, vi nga Universiteti Mitrovicës, edukimi parafillor. Shumë familje në Kosovë kanë dëshirë me dërgu fëmijën në institucion parashkollor, mirë po të e marë parasysh gjendjen ekonomike, nuk ju jepet kjo mundësi. A mendoni që shteti, i shkon një ide mirë që shteti ju kishë ndihmu sa do pak këtyne familjeve, me ju dojnë ndihmë duke ja u japur 1% furnizimit me pare?
Yeah, interesting question. There is one country who did that, that's the Netherlands. So instead of subsidizing centers, they subsidized the parents. And every parent get a kind of some money, and not in his pocket, but a kind of, and with that amount of money he's going to on the market to choose an early childhood center. We have looked in Europe with a lot of, we found that very interesting but also a bit dangerous, because it's what you are doing then is putting early childhood on the market. And what we have seen is that suddenly there were huge international organizations from Anglo-Saxon countries who are coming to the Netherlands. There is now a big organization who is on the stock market. So if you start with subsidizing parents instead of institutions, then you open the door, and that's a choice you have to make. Then you open the door for a marketization of early childhood education. And the Dutch now, they are in a very difficult situation, because now a lot of them want to get rid of the system. But once you gave to the private sector, but I don't mean little individuals who are setting up a childcare center, but I'm talking now about organizations who have 150, 200, 250 childcare centers. And if once they have so many childcare centers, then it's the elephant in the room. You cannot change it anymore, because they are so powerful, and from ethical point of view, I don't know if you can make money with early childhood education, because it's a public good. And but I understand your question. There are a lot of people who are saying, "Oh, we're going to help parents," and of course you can say that from the child benefits that you can spend a part of it to the for early childhood age. That you can say, but be very careful by giving all the money that it costs to through the parents to private organizations, because then you get a complete privatization of the whole early childhood market. That's a choice, of course. But and then the problem in the Netherlands is that the poor children are not in those childcare centers. They are in separate centers. So you get a completely separate system between the poor and between the middle class. Yeah. Yeah. We have to stop in 2 minutes.
Unë dëshiroj të ndërlidhna me parapolsen, shteti dhe ashtu nuk kemi bën hapa të rëndësishëm rreth rritjes përqindjes, po shteti 80% të këtyne i financon edhe pagat e tyne edhe shërbimet e tyne, dikun 20% janë prej të hyra, prej pagesave, bashpagesave që i bojnë për fëmijë. Kështu që është të financu shteti, edhe në aspekt social është të financuan, po duhet ta kuptojmë jem një shtet i ri dhe nuk mund të barazohem me shtete në zhvillim. Aja shka është me rëndësi, unë e thash edhe ma heret, është hartu ligjin, fazën përfundimtare është, edhe nëse ai legji parashet disa kritere, faktikisht qeveria nëse e aprovon, aja është e implementuese. Nëse nuk kem bazë ligjore, na ka të flasëm këto. Kështu që është një rrugë e mirë që qeveria e ka prioritet, Në gjitha dokumentet strategjike është edukimi parafillor është prioritet, tash është duke u ndërtu baza ligjore, mas ligjit janë aktet në ligjore, edhe për grumbullimin e tyrave dhe për raste sociale, se ju e përmendët edhe më herët e studentat e thatë që vendet tjera investojnë vitin e parë ma shumë të na e kundërta. Edhe këto investohet, po nuk ipen bursat, po shërbimet në vitin e parë studentat i kanë papare. Kështu që një farë forme edhe shteti Kosovës po ndihmon këtë aspekt. Faleminderit.
Thank you.
Përshëndetje për të gjithë. Kom pyetje për profesorin, po më intereson çysh është i rregullum pushimi i lindjes në Belgjik, kur e dim që këtu në sektorin privat, domethënë fëmia duhet me u ndo prej nënës qysh në moshën 6 muajsh, e për sektorin publik prej 9 muaj. Edhe qysh ndikon që ajo ndomja në zhvillimin ose në edukimin e hershëm të fëmisë, nëse bëhet domethënë moshën 6 muajore.
In Belgium, it's 3 months and a half, so it is the maternity leave is only 3 months and a half. Yeah, there has been a lot of discussion, especially 10 years ago, so in the year 2000, about what is the best age to go to childcare. So from the age of 12 months, there is no discussion when it's of high quality. Under the age of 12 months, yeah, it depends upon the study, and I think sincerely that it depends upon the quality of childcare in the countries where it has been measured in the study. Yeah, it's in Europe also a big debate. You have in Hungary, you have 3 years of maternal leave, and they have nearly no childcare available. But it's also a political question, because it means also if you have, for instance, if you live in Hungary and you have 2 times a child, and then you are 6 years out of the, then I don't know if you can come back on the labor market. I don't think so. So it's also towards women. It's quite a problem, I think. So maternity leave is good, but you must always also look at what is the impact for the mother to stay at home such a long time. And if you talk about 6 months, I think it's okay. If you talk about 9 months, for me as a Belgian, I already found that quite a lot. But there is a longer tradition in this part of Europe than in the northern part of Europe, where you have very short maternity leaves. And then another interesting question is who is taking up the parental needs. Is it only the mother, or is it the mother and the father? And that's another interesting question. I think if you enlarge the parental leave, that one part can only be taken up by the parents, because, and then I'm saying it as a man working for many years in early childhood education, I think everything which has to do with young children is still such a woman issue. If you have long maternal leave, like 9 months, then as a father, it's very complicated to take up your role for such a young child, because you have to go working and your wife is at home. It means that you have immediately a role division between the father and the mother. And so therefore, that's personal, that's not as a researcher, I'm not so in favor of long maternal leaves. I think 6 months is more than enough, but that's my personal opinion. It's not the research we're saying. The last one, because we have to.
Faleminderit. Tia nga e pyll ka të Prishtinë. Nashta pak po ju mundojmë edhe po ju lëvizim me pyetja herë në fillim bisedës që i herë në fund, kërkoj falje. Mirë po dashëm pak të më shpalos edhe thesarin tuaj të njohurive që keni marrë nga kurrikulat e vendet e ndryshme. Me theks të veçantë përmendet që juve ju ka bërë shumë përshtypje kurrikula që zbatohet në institucionet tona parashkollore. Kisha dashur vetëm një detaj, cila është ajo që tek ju ka lënë përshtypje, në fakt që ju e veç e definuat që është shumë e mirë. Faleminderit.
Yeah. It's already 2 years ago, and so my memory is not so good. So I know at the time, because I was involved in 4 different countries, in Albania, Montenegro, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And at that time, when I compared the 4 curriculums, I found that the one of Kosovo was one of the better curriculums. But I will be honest, I cannot see the curriculum in front of me. It's already 2.5 years ago, I think, since I wrote the report. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you very much. I think it was a good discussion. Thank you.
Në emër të organizatorëve, unë falenderoj profesorin Jan për të gjitha prezentimet. Në fakt, për 3 prezentimet që i dëgjum gjatë ditës së sotme, koka që rëndësishme do t'jetë edhe dita e nesërme. Unë falenderoj panelistët, organizatorët për ditën e sotme që edhe një herë u shprehën të zëtuar për edukimin e hershëm në Kosovë. Dita e nesërme do t'jetë më interaktive, sepse do të kem prezentime nga niveli lokal, do të kemi prezantim shumë të rëndësishëm sa i përket kurrikulës së edukimit parafillor në Kosovë nga Instituti Pedagogjik, do të kemi panelistë të nivelit qendror dhe të instituteve nga Shqipëria dhe Maqedonia dhe Kosova, dhe panelistë nga universiteti. Shumë të rëndësishëm do të kemi edhe 2 prezantime tjera të cilat shpalosen gjatë ditës së nesërme me praktika të mira të projekteve të cilat po implementohen në Kosovë nga UNICEF dhe Caritasi i Zvicrës. Prandaj unë edhe një herë në emër të organizatorëve ju falenderoj që ishin në numër kaq të madh gjatë ditës së sotme dhe shpresoj shumë që të jemi bashkë edhe gjatë ditës së nesërme, sepse prezantimet dhe ndoshta të dhënat për Kosovën dhe për shtetet e rajonit do t'i ndëgjojmë nesër, gjithsesi do ta kemi edhe profesorin Jan për të plotësu pyetje nëse ne do të kemi nevojë. Dhe një herë faleminderit dhe miru takofshim nesër në orën 9.